Yeah, this new Lil Tecca project, it's not good. 2 mixtapes deep and now 2 albums deep. New York rapper and singer Lil Tecca. Here is his latest album here. It's titled Tech, and honestly, I'm going into this project having never really enjoyed a record or mixtape he'd put out in the past, or even really a song for that matter. The huge single Ransom, which popped off due to a big lyrical Lemonade bump. Even that track is pretty much like, washed completely out of my memory at this point. I was sort of debating on whether or not to even listen to this project given how boring and basic I found Tecca's previous work to be. And you know what? I kind of made myself do it this time, and the results were not great. As right from the get-go, right from track 1, halfway into track 1 on this thing, I actually forgot I was even listening to an album, but I do have to give Tecca some credit in that this record is not super long at 16 tracks that end just before 40 minutes. I mean, there are loads of artists who are at his very similar talent level who, for whatever reason, choose to put out hour-long plus projects with anywhere from like 25 to 30 tracks, and it's just not necessary. You don't have that much to say. And Tecca, realizing this, decided to not bloat this project out too much, and that is cool. Especially since, again, I did not really find there to be that much to dive into, and even at the relatively moderate length that this project is at, I still found it to be a slog. In fact, not only did I forget I was even listening to a record before track 1 was even over, but by track 2, Heaven on Earth with Kodak Black, I was kind of stuck here wondering, how did this guy maintain fame up until this point? His vocals and flows aren't remotely memorable in any way. I feel like I'm mostly listening to a new software update from whatever AI-generated rapper program developed Nav. And while the latest version here does sound like more human, it's still pretty generic and nondescript, because there's not really anything about Tecca's auto-croon style that stands out in the current field of artists who are doing the same thing. In fact, the only thing I found interesting about this track were the little chipmunked vocal hits sampled in the beat that honestly are kind of mixed like shit anyway. Meanwhile, the following track's only redeemable quality is the beat switch at the very end of the song that really just kind of ends up being a way for this track to segue into the next one, which that does randomly happen at certain points on this record. You may end up with a fade out or a random hard ending, or miraculously out of the blue, you could end up with a really tight segue into the next song. This track being 500 Pounds, which is by far the most interesting track on the record. Not that it's mind-blowing or anything like that, but it actually has a head-nodding groove to it and a melodic flow that's actually worth remembering. Although I will say, by the end of this track, I mostly ended up feeling like Lil Tecca was kind of like a poor man's Roddy Ricch. But once again, when we hit the title track, I was just left wondering, where's the charisma? Where's the hook? Where's anything that you can like recall once the song is over? Are we just merely curating vibes here and that's it? Can we get a song? Can we get anything other than just like auto-tuned slop and drivel? And look, to be clear, I don't hate that this album is making use of like trap beats and auto-tune to, have a little fun or add some color to the mix. But in the case of Lil Tecca, it's clear this stuff is being leaned on as a crutch for a lack of talent. All the post-production and presumably punching in is the only thing making him palatable. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if it weren't for all of the pitching and excessive overdubbing and layering and everything like that, his vocals wouldn't even pop. But by that same token, all the processing and manipulations across this record kind of make his vocals suck. Like, suck to listen to because they're so annoying and grating. And I guess on this LP, he would rather leave a bad impression than no impression. Because when this record isn't doing something that's borderline giving me a headache, it's just kind of falling into the background and sounding essentially like Rap Caviar wallpaper, which continues uninterrupted until we hit maybe about track 10, where Tecca begins to give us some vaguely tropical vibes on the production side. And again, while it is a switch up, it is a different mood. It just kind of is a display for a lack of songwriting and song ideas, how creatively bankrupt this album is at its core, because we're not really getting any coherent coherent melodic or structural ideas on this thing. We're just kind of getting a vibe. It's lasting for a certain amount of time, and then it's dipping. Because in order to get a stream, a repeat, a click, an engagement, you don't really need to give the audience anything more than that. Which is also the case for the next track, You Don't Know Tech, which is one of the shorter cuts on the entire LP. I mean, the track isn't that much longer than an iTunes preview from the mid-2000s, and doesn't develop much further than one either. The final leg of the record is just as weak as the first. We occasionally get what sounds like a dumb person's idea of a clever bar, like riding on my dick like you not tired. Yeah, she got mileage, she ain't got tires. Then on track 15, Need Me for a Spare Second, we get like a little tiny sample, a little whiff of Brandy and Monica's The Boy Is Mine, and it sort of like fades in really quick and then it disappears, and then we just get like this forgettable mid-ass song that comes right after. Like if you were gonna nod to such an amazing track or do an interpolation or something like that, I imagine pulling it off on a larger scale would have been more entertaining or just kind of added more to the cut. But instead you just kind of ended up wasting a sample opportunity on a song that you didn't even really work into the production all that well, which again just goes to show how much of everything on this record feels so low effort. The closing cut on this thing is a snooze too. This album is all around just a dreadful bore. And listening to this record, unfortunately, just kind of feels like staring into an empty void where there is truly just a lack of anything to observe or comment on because so little is actually going on. Yeah, this Lil Tecca project, it's not good.